Welcome to the Offer versus Serve training for breakfast and lunch, presented by Oregon Department of Education Child Nutrition Program. Offer versus Serve, or OVS, is a concept that applies to menu planning and the meal service. OVS allows students to decline some of the food offered in a reimbursable meal. The goals of OVS are to reduce food waste and to permit students to choose the foods they want to eat. Because students may choose fewer selections under OVS, guidance is provided on what constitutes a reimbursable meal. For breakfast and lunch, all reimbursable meals must be priced as a unit. OVS does not affect a meal's unit price, so students pay same price whether selecting the minimum or all foods offered. Students pay same price if they select less than the required serving size for additional, beyond minimum, food components or items. For breakfast, the sponsor must offer at least 4 different food items from the 3 required food components: grains, fruit, and milk. The student must select 3 food items for OVS. At lunch, the sponsor must offer all 5 components: meat alternate, grain, fruit, vegetable, and milk. The student must select 3 food components for OVS. As part of Offer versus Serve, students must select a fruit or vegetable as one of the 3 required food items or food components. Reminder: food component is defined as one of the 5 food components: meat alternate, grain, fruit, vegetable, fluid milk, and food item is an individual food item that is offered within a food component. Students, servers, and cashiers must be able to identify what constitutes or makes up a reimbursable meal. The NSLP regulation requires that schools identify near or at the beginning of serving lines what foods constitute unit price reimbursable meals. Schools using OVS must also identify what a student must select in order to have a reimbursable meal under OVS. Signage and menus should provide clear information about allowable choices. This will help students easily build a reimbursable meal and is especially important to avoid problems at the point of service. Signage is not required for field trips, breakfast in the classroom, and other venues where signage may be a problem. We continue to encourage schools to offer a variety of food items to students. However, it is important to recognize that offering a variety of choices within the food components is different from OVS. If choices within the components are offered, the menu planner must indicate to students what choices or combination of choices the student may select to have a reimbursable meal. One common example for the school breakfast program is cereal types. Offering 4 different types of cereal and instructing the students to select one is not the same as offering 4 grain items. Because the student can only select one, only one grain item, cereal, is being offered to each student, even though the student can select from several cereal options. Pre-plated meals are those that offer all food components or food items in the quantities required for each grade group in an entirely or partially pre-served manner. Pre-plated meals must include at least the daily minimum quantities required under the meal pattern. This system is often used by schools and RCCIs that have logistical limitations, such as facility or space restrictions or situations where children are unable to select the food offered. Partial pre-plating can be combined with Offer versus Serve. For example, you could offer a pre-plated entree and give students choices for the fruit, vegetable, grain, and/or milk component food items, separately to allow students to have some variety. A basket with a variety of fruit and/or a separate cooler with milk choices would be possible ways to implement Offer versus Serve. Now we will discuss the lunch requirements and Offer versus Serve. Only senior high schools, typically the 9 through 12 grades or any other grade configuration labeled as a high school, are required to have Offer versus Serve. Sponsors can choose whether or not they want to have Offer versus Serve for their junior high, middle, and elementary schools with board approval. Students must be offered all 5 required food components at lunch in the full required amounts. All meals must be set at a single price, no matter how many components are declined. Reimbursable lunch meals in the National School Lunch Program are comprised of 5 food components. The 5 food components offered to all students at lunch are meat alternate, fruit, vegetable, grain, and fluid milk. Under OVS, all students at any grade level must select at least 3 of 5 food components, and one of the choices selected must be at least a half cup serving of fruit or vegetable component or half cup total serving of both fruit and vegetable. If half cup of fruit is selected, the student must select the full required daily serving of the vegetable component for it to be counted as meeting the vegetable component. Likewise, if students select half cup of vegetable, the student must select the full required daily serving of the fruit component for it to be counted as meeting the fruit component. The minimum creditable serving size for a fruit or a vegetable is 1/8 cup. However, half of a cup is the minimum amount of fruits or vegetables that a student must select for a reimbursable meal under OVS. Example: a chicken salad wrap recipe contains 1/8 of a cup of diced celery per serving. The celery can count as 1/8 of a cup of other vegetables. However, if the student selected the wrap, they would also need to have 3/8 of a cup of another fruit or vegetable to equal the 1/2 cup of required fruit or vegetable for a reimbursable meal. You should familiarize yourself with the menu. Identify how the foods on the menu are being credited for each of the meal components. When you look at each student's meal selection, ask yourself these 3 questions to make sure it is a reimbursable offer versus serve lunch meal. Are there at least 3 food components in full serving size? Yes or no? If yes, is one a fruit or a vegetable? Yes or no? If yes, is it at least half a cup? Yes or no? If you can answer yes to each of these questions, then you have a reimbursable lunch meal. Staff must be trained to judge accurately the quantities of self-serve items on a student's tray to identify half-cup fruit or vegetable servings. We recommend that sponsors use spoodles, portioning spoons. Another option is to use souffle cups, however that can be costly and wasteful. Students must walk away from the line with at least half cup fruit or vegetable. During the meal service observation on an administrative review, the assigned specialist will be checking that students take this minimum amount. For the next few slides, we are going to practice being a cashier. Ask yourself, is this meal reimbursable? This meal is for K-8 offer versus serve. The student was offered grilled chicken wrap that has 2-ounce equivalent meat alternate, 1/8 cup red orange vegetable, and 1/8 cup legume vegetable, and a whole grain rich tortilla that equals 2-ounce equivalent of grains. The student was also offered 3/4 cup of broccoli, dark green vegetable, fresh orange that is half cup fruit, and 1 cup of non-fat fluid milk. The student has selected the grilled chicken wrap with the 2-ounce equivalent meat alternate, 1/8 cup red orange vegetable, and 1/8 cup of legumes, and a whole grain rich tortilla that has 2-ounce equivalent of grains. Is this meal reimbursable for K-8 offer versus serve? This meal is not reimbursable. Under offer versus serve, the student must take half cup of fruit and or vegetable. This meal only has 1/4 cup fruit and or vegetable. Now let's look at a meal for 6 through 8 offer versus serve. The student was offered a hamburger on a whole grain rich bun with a 2-ounce equivalent meat alternate and 1.5-ounce equivalent grain, and carrots of a half cup of red orange vegetable, and black bean salad with a half cup legume and a fourth cup of other vegetable. They were also offered half cup of grapes and 1 cup of non-fat fluid milk. The student has selected whole grain rich hamburger on a bun with a 2-ounce equivalent meat alternate and 1.5-ounce equivalent of grain, and carrots, half cup red orange vegetable, and the black bean salad with a half cup legumes, fourth cup of other vegetable, and 1 cup of milk. Is this meal reimbursable for 6 through 8 offer versus serve? This meal is reimbursable for 6 through 8. When you look at each student's meal selection, remember to ask yourself these 3 questions to make sure it's a reimbursable offer versus serve lunch meal. Number 1, are there at least 3 food components? Yes, the student chose meat alternate, grains, milk, and a half cup vegetable. Number 2, if yes, is one a fruit or a vegetable? Yes. And number 3, if yes, is that at least a half a cup? And yes, they selected at least a half a cup. Since all questions can be answered yes, the meal that the student chose is a reimbursable meal. To ensure that each student's selection from the variety salad bar met the required portion for an entree or food menu item, the point of service must be stationed after the variety salad bar. If a school is not able to position the variety salad bar in a location prior to the point of service, the state agency may authorize alternatives to the point of service on a yearly basis. If the fruits and vegetables are located in an approved location beyond the point of service, there must be a system in place to ensure that each reimbursable meal selected by the student includes a fruit or a vegetable, and that the total of any fruit or vegetable item selected under offer versus serve equals at least a half cup. With regard to meal identification signage, labeling, listing, or otherwise identifying food components near or at the beginning of the serving line is required. This is so students can understand and can easily choose all the components for a reimbursable meal. The requirement that lunch service time must be between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. remains in place. A new regulation that was implemented in the final rule of the last NSLP reauthorization is that sponsors must have adequate lunch period. What does adequate mean? Schools should provide sufficient lunch periods that are long enough to give all students adequate time to be served and to eat their lunch. Now we'll discuss OVS requirements for breakfast. Please note, OVS in the school breakfast program is optional for all age grade groups. The meal pattern for breakfast consists of 3 food components. 1, fruit or vegetable substitution. 2, grain or optional credited meat alternate. And 3, milk. The age grade groups for breakfast are K5, 6-8, and 9-12. For OVS, at least 4 food items from 3 food components must be offered. All students at any grade level must select at least 3 food items. For grains or meat alternate offered for this component and milk, the student must select the daily minimum required amount, and students must select at least half cup of fruit or vegetables. A grain component selection may be credited as a food item if the total amount selected equals at least the minimum 1 daily ounce equivalent requirement for the age grade group. 1/4 of an ounce equivalent of a grain serving in a product or recipe is the smallest amount that may be credited toward the grain component. All grain offerings over the course of the week must be whole grain rich. At this time, schools are only required to meet the daily and weekly minimum requirement for this food component. There is a range over the school week with a minimum number of ounce equivalents that must be offered. This means that on some days, schools must offer more than the minimum daily amount to meet the minimum weekly requirement. There is no separate requirement to offer the meat alternate component in the breakfast meal pattern. However, menu planners have 2 options for including meat alternate in breakfast. A school may offer meat alternate in place of grains after the minimum daily grain requirement, 1 ounce equivalent, for all age grade group is offered. The student does not have to select the grain items in order for the meat alternate to credit as food items on the student's tray. For this option, 1 ounce equivalent of meat alternate may count as 1 ounce equivalent of grain for the purpose of meeting the weekly grain component requirement. A second option a school may take is to offer meat alternate as an extra food and not credit it toward any component. If a meat alternate is used as an extra food, it does not count toward the daily or weekly grain component requirement, but must still be counted towards the weekly dietary specifications. Additionally, the meat alternate cannot be counted as a food item. Therefore, 4 food items in addition to an extra meat alternate food must be offered for offer versus serve. If the menu planner opts to offer a meat alternate as an extra food, staff and students must be aware that this is extra food and is not counted for OVS purposes, and that there are 3 other food items must be selected for a reimbursable meal. At least 1 cup of fruit must be offered in reimbursable breakfast for all age grade groups. Menu planners may allow students to select more than the daily minimum serving for this component if the weekly dietary specification, including calories, are not exceeded. Schools may offer vegetables in place of fruits. 2 cups per week of any such substitution must be from the following subgroups: dark green, red orange, beans, peas, or other vegetables. Full strength fruit or vegetable juice may be offered to meet up to 1/2 of the weekly fruit requirement. To be credited as part of a reimbursable breakfast for OVS, the minimum quantity a student must select is 1/2 cup fruits, or 1/2 cup vegetables offered in place of fruit, or 1/2 cup of total of fruit and a vegetable when offered in place of fruit, or 1/2 cup in an item with both fruit and vegetables, such as salsa made with tomatoes and fruit. For all grade groups, 1 cup of fluid milk must be offered daily. It may be used as a beverage on cereal or used in part for each purpose. Milk used in a recipe or food products does not count toward the milk component. The weekly minimum amount of 5 cups of milk may be met by offering the daily minimum of 1 cup. There is also a daily requirement to offer a variety, at least 2, milk choices. For this component to be credited for offer versus serve, the student must select at least 1 cup of fluid milk. For the next few slides, we are going to practice being a cashier. Ask yourself, is this meal reimbursable? The meal is for K5, offer versus serve. The student was offered 1 ounce equivalent cereal, 1 ounce equivalent whole grain rich toast, 1 cup fruit juice, and 8 ounce of milk. The student has selected 1 ounce equivalent cereal, 1/2 cup of fruit juice, and 8 ounces of milk. Is this a reimbursable breakfast? Yes, because the student selected at least 3 of the 4 components and one of those choices met the 1/2 cup fruit requirement. This meal is for a 9 through 12 age grade group. The student was offered a slice of whole grain rich toast, 1 ounce equivalent grain, orange slices, 1/2 cup fruit, 8 ounces of milk, 1/2 cup of juice, hard-boiled egg. In this example, the hard-boiled egg is being offered as an extra food. The student selected orange slices, 1/2 cup fruit, 8 ounce of milk, and hard-boiled egg. Is this meal reimbursable? In this example, the hard-boiled egg is being offered as an extra food and may not be credited toward the grain component. The egg, since it's an extra food, may not be counted as one of the 3 food items required for a reimbursable meal. The student must select 1 additional food item for this to count as a reimbursable meal. For more information on offer versus serve, here is a list of some helpful resources: the Offer versus Serve Manual and the School Nutrition Program Training website. Thank you for viewing the Offer versus Serve training for breakfast and lunch. If you have any questions, please contact your assigned specialist. Thank you for all the work that you do to fuel Oregon's future.